Hello. My name is Boozy ASMR, and today I'm going to read the introduction to this book, Marx at the Arcade. Consoles, Controllers, and Class Struggle by Jamie Woodcock. This is a very interesting book that I'd like to read with you today. It combines my love of leftist thought and video games. So, with that, I'm going to read it to you now. I hope you enjoy. Alright. Today I'm going to read the introduction. Popular culture is one of the sides where this struggle for and against a culture of the powerful is engaged. It is also the stake to be won or lost in that struggle. It is the arena of consent and resistance. It is partly where hegemony arises and where it is secured. It is not a sphere where socialism, a socialist culture already fully formed, might be simply expressed, but it is one of the places where socialism might be constituted. That is why popular culture matters. Otherwise, to tell you the truth, I don't give a damn about it. That was Stuart Hill. Notes on deconstructing the popular. Jamie Woodcock continues. One of my earliest memories of video games is sitting in front of a computer, trying to figure out how to work the MS-DOS operating system. A friend of my dad's gave him games loaded onto floppy disks to pass along to me. Sometimes they came in plain paper packaging, other times in larger cardboard boxes, filled with paper manuals and other ephemera. I would write down the instructions for playing different games on post-it notes, which became scattered around the screen. I remember thinking that the games required some expertise, that you had to learn how to play them. Those early games, pixelated and colorful, were a route into another world for me. I directed lemmings, using different commands to try and stop any from falling off cliffs. I ventured out from the crashed spaceship of Commander Keen. Eagerly investigating the game's world. I also, for reasons I never quite understood, explored the fantasy world of that anthropomorphized egg with a hat. Dizzy. Then there were the video games, like the platformer Duke Nukem, in which I shot my way through levels. All of these games were passed along by someone who programmed computers for a living. was taught to play Tetris on a Nintendo Game Boy while sitting on the staircase of a family friend's home. Another friend taught me to play console games, introducing me to Sonic, Mario, and others. I remember sitting on the floor, poring over the paper manuals while Civilization installed, wondering whether the installer had crashed or if the loading bar could really take so long. I feel you. I felt at the time that Civilization was not just a game, but that it had educational value. Another reason for just one more turn. My paper manual for Street Fighter Alpha 2 had all the pages torn out, so I had to try and learn the moves with friends while we battled it out in front of the TV. I built sprawling metropolises in SimCity, astonished that I could then fly a helicopter through them in Simcopter. Baldur's Gate was the closest I ever got to Dungeons and Dragons. I would meet with friends to compare notes on how the characters and the story developed. Moving on from those games, I explored post-apocalyptic wastelands and Fallout, and played for the evil side in Dungeon Keeper. The first console I ever owned was a PlayStation. I still vividly remember the sound effect and exclamation mark flashing on the screen upon a player being discovered in the stealth game Metal Gear Solid, along with the snake at Game Over, and the shock of the boss fight that broke the fourth wall, making it seem like the TV channel accidentally changed. At the time broadband internet first became widely available, I built my own PC. That need for expertise was there again, brought on by the fear that static electricity would damage the components, along with the ongoing debate with my friends about the best way to apply thermal paste to a CPU. The first online video game I played was Counter-Strike version 1.4, and I've played that series on and off since. I played World of Warcraft on the custom PC too. Many of these video games from my childhood have aged badly, while others have been transformed as the game series evolved. I have no doubt forgotten many that I played, but I can place these older games within periods of my life which brings back much broader memories. Video games have been with me almost my entire life, and the continuing pace of their development is dizzying. Over this time, video games have also become a form of mass culture. Last year, nearly 70% of Americans played video games, while the global industry generated revenues of $108.4 billion. Video games no longer feel like a pursuit that requires niche expertise to access. They are everywhere now. Now that I am older, video games are something I have to make time for, whether unwinding after work or carving out the time to dive into a new title. I have a Steam collection with more unplayed games than I would care to admit, but I still do find the time to play video games and talk about them. In a way, the process of researching for and writing Marx at the arcade was also an excuse to play some more video games. It also provided the opportunity to combine video games with another of my interests, Marxism. As I think back to those earlier times, who would have thought that 20 years later, Karl Marx would actually have relevance to the world of video games? It is rare. It is a rare combination that might seem like quite a jump to conceive. But then again, the old Moor did recently make his digital debut in Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Syndicate, part of the long-running Ubisoft series Assassin's Creed and released in 2015, is set in London in 1868. The plot covers convoluted time travel, battles between assassins and the Knights Templar, bizarre technology, and everything else that players have come to love and expect throughout the series. The main character, Desmond Miles, is trapped within a sister corporation and made to relive the genetic memories of his ancestors. This provides the backdrop for the player to visit key moments of history, including the Third Crusade, the French Revolution, the Golden Age of piracy, among others. Despite this complicated plot, the game also provides the backdrop for this book. It highlights some of the key dynamics of contemporary video games and draws attention to themes that will be explored throughout the book, as well as providing an example of Marx in an actual game, in a way that definitely introduces him into the analysis. Upon loading Assassin's Creed Syndicate, a statement flashes on the screen. Inspired by historical events and characters, this work of fiction was designed, developed, and produced by a multicultural team of various beliefs, sexual orientations, and gender identities. Unsurprisingly, nothing more is said about how workers at Ubisoft made the game. There are no details about how many people were involved, what the work was like, or any disagreements in the process. This gives way to a title screen decorated with turning cogs and indeterminate pieces of metal machinery in motion, with steam drifting over the screen. This is an Assassin's Creed set after the Industrial Revolution in a London filled with factories, dense housing, smokestacks, and railway tracks. The game revolves around Desmond's assassin ancestors, the twins Jacob and Evie Fry, who are trying to regain London from Templar control and find some sort of artifact. The twins are armed with hidden wrist blades for stabbing people, can free run up and down buildings, and have grappling hooks for soaring through the air. With these abilities, they make the city their dangerous playground. Their focus is the chief villain, Crawford Sturrock, a Templar who is responsible for the current state of London. As one character describes him, there is no aspect of society he does not control, no industry that escapes his grim touch. In the first mission, the player takes control of Jacob after breaking into a factory. He watches as a child is crushed, screaming in pain. Rupert Ferris, the industrialist, complains. How long does he intend to go on like this? He's disrupting the other workers, shut his trap, and get the machine fixed, and send me some laudanum for my head. Jacob replies out of earshot, coming right up. The player can then ferry run across the factory to try to reach Ferris, but will find the door locked. After engaging in some old-fashioned sabotage of the factory, Jacob can then be directed to drop from the rafters to assassinate Ferris with those hidden blades. From the killing of Ferris, the story develops into a series of core missions which involve taking over London boroughs, and many, many side missions. After causing some trouble, Sterritt gives the following monologue. Gentlemen, this tea was brought to me from India by a ship, then up from the harbour to a factory where it was packaged and ferried by carriage to my door. Unpacked in the larder and brought upstairs to me, all by men and women who work for me, who are indebted to me, offered Sterritt for their jobs, their time, the very lives they lead. They will work in my factories, and so too shall their children. And you come to me with talk of this Jacob Fry, this insignificant blemish who calls himself assassin. You disrespect the very city that works day and night so that we may drink this miracle, this tea. As I played through this stage of the game, it brought to mind all the different workers and processes that must have come together across the world to allow the player to enjoy this miracle. The video game, like the cup of tea, requires complex global supply chains and different kinds of labor to ensure the final object can be consumed by the player. Uncovering these supply chains today will take more than just studying the lines of an evil monologue. The first encounter with Karl Marx in Assassin's Creed Syndicate takes place in the packed Whitechapel train station, somewhere I used to pass through daily in modern real-life London. Moving through the crowds, Marx can be spotted arguing with the policeman. In his German accent, he shouts, "You cannot frighten me. I insist on being heard." Once the player reaches Marx, a pop-up notes that the player can start the mission titled Karl Marx Memories, Cat and Mouse, and that they will need to help Marx avoid the London police. In a cutscene, a short expository clip in a video game, the twins approach Marx, who introduces himself. Much like you, I am an activist of sorts. He explained that the twins have done more for London's citizens lately than any endeavor has accomplished in a decade. But those citizens were already well provided for. I challenge you both to help those who really need your assistance, the working people. Before Jacob can say anything, Evie replies, "An interesting challenge. We accept." Marx explains that he is organizing a discreet meeting with some like-minded friends to discuss trade unions. The player is directed to, quote, "follow Marx." A good start to the mission. The first mission involves the twins protecting Marx by killing spies. The next encounter starts with Marx standing outside a factory. A pop-up announces the mission. Find proof that a factory is abusing its workforce. Marx explains. Corruption reigns here, I am sure of it. The number of people injured by their machinery cannot be calculated. yet the company continues to prosper. They must be stopped for the sake of the poor workers they abuse, if only we had some form of proof. There must be records of the accident somewhere inside which would surely provide their malfeasance. I should think you would need to find the foreman, but how you'd convince him to give you the reports. Perhaps, if they think the factory is on fire, you might bluff your way past. The player is directed to find and ignite the cotton bales along with the optional assassinate a guard. The player can then break into the factory, jumping in through a window. While the machinery whirls around them, the player sets fire to cotton bales and the factory fills with smoke. The next step is hijacking a fire truck, bringing it back to the factory. The foreman comes out thinking they are being saved, but the player's character replies to them, "Saved? Are you daft? What about the reports? Your masters won't be happy." The foreman, followed by the player, goes to retrieve the reports. Once back outside the factory, the player picks the foreman's pocket, securing the reports for Marx. Video games, it may be no surprise to hear, often take quite a lot of artistic license with historical details. Marx did not employ twin assassins to kill spies with hidden gauntlet blades, nor did he convince them to break into factories and steal reports. The historical account is, at least as far as we know, much less exciting. The reality is that Marx drew on the publicly available factory inspectors' reports. He would later also experiment with the use of surveys as methods of workers' inquiry to interrogate and understand workers' conditions. This moment of inquiry in Assassin's Creed, albeit far removed from Marx's actual methods, is one favorable to being turned outward and used to examine the industry that produced it. It suggests a way to unpack the type of relationships that Starrick identifies in his team monologue, and it exposes a critical question. Where does a game like Assassin's Creed come from? Where does the game's creation entail? From the workers who developed it to the supply chains that make it playable at home, easily appearing as a modern miracle, much like Starrick's tea. Instead of convincing assassins to break into the workplaces of the video game industry, this book will explore what we can learn when applying Marx's methods of inquiry to the present day. Back in Assassin's Creed, there are two subsequent missions about an attempted bombing which Marx asks the player to prevent. Marx is presented as a pacifist, while the bomber is branded an anarchist. The final mission, Vox Populi, involves meeting Marx at a pub in Southwark. After the assassins knock out a number of people who try to disrupt the meeting, a full-on brawl erupts, with shots fired. After saving Marx, the assassins are asked, "I don't suppose you'd formally join the Workers' Party." Neither assassin takes up the offer. The reward flashes up. £1,100 plus 150. Experience 850 plus 150. And it colors wine, which means from now on the characters are virtually richer and more experienced and can also choose red clothes. The assassins may not have joined the communists, although this option is not left to the player, but they can now at least look the part, which of course I immediately did while playing the game. I would do the same, my friend. We know, of course, that Marx had nothing to say of video games given they did not exist at the time. Though, he was a chess player, and there is even a record of a game he played after he finished writing Capital. one's mission. In this book, I will follow Marx, taking a journey through the world of video games. Part 1 is a discussion of how video games are made, in which I cover the history of play in video games, analyze the video games industry, and focus on the work of video games, as well as how workers are organizing today. In Part 2, I discuss the play of video games. This includes thinking about how to analyze culture and looking at key genres of video games, the role of politics, and what has happened to online play. The conclusion will argue that Marxists should be interested in video games, despite the fact that many have ignored them, and that video game players can benefit from adopting a Marxist analysis. Video games are a terrain of cultural struggle, shaped by work, capitalism, and ideas about society. Through the pages that follow, I will draw out the struggle and resistance that has marked video games from the start, thinking about what that means for today. So, that is the introduction to Marx at the Arcade, Consoles, Controllers, and Class Struggle by Jamie Woodcock. I'm very interested to see how the rest of this book unfolds. I may read the rest of this on my YouTube channel as well. I think you might enjoy it. Seems like a very interesting read and something worth discussing on this channel. I'd like to talk about lots of interesting topics on this channel, and maybe I can get some discussion going in the comment section. Some very, constructive conversation where, we discuss things civilly, but vigorously defend our positions on these subjects. So I hope that this relaxed you and, give you something to think about. If you were watching this to go to sleep, I hope you fell asleep. Or if you were just listening to this to relax you or learn something, I hope that you were relaxed and you learned something new. Video games and Marxist thought going together is something that I'm very interested in, so I'm hoping to explore that more in this book. So, with that said, this is Boozy ASMR.